Good afternoon, everyone. This Thursday afternoon, we are completely live again from Rotterdam for the next webinar of SYMSON. The title of this webinar is The Underestimated Role of Segmenting Your Product for Price Optimization. And we're completely live today from LinkedIn and YouTube. Welcome, everyone. It was great to see that so many people are interested in this topic. We've never had so many attendees for this webinar, so it's great to be here. It's great to see you all in this webinar. And the coming 45 minutes, we will talk mainly about product segmentation. This topic has a little bit needs a little bit more background information. I think the last couple of webinars we mainly presented the solutions of SYMSON. But when we talk to our customers, but also to potential customers, we actually discovered that a lot of these companies have challenges with segmenting their products correctly, or segmenting the products before they actually can optimize their prices. So therefore, we made this webinar to give you some ideas, some inspiration, how you could segment your products based upon the data you have. And that's what we like to present today. Speaking today, the speakers, as you know, Vincent Gelink, Director of SYMSON, and my name is Arjen Oosthoek, co-founder of SYMSON. And in this webinar, we made this agenda. So first, we will talk about the importance of pricing in today's economy. Then we will give you an overview of why product segmentation nowadays is an underestimated activity in pricing management. Then I will give the floor to Vincent. He will introduce the product segmentation model. This is the core model we discuss in this presentation. We will discuss it with examples and how-tos. And in the fourth agenda point, we will give you ideas how a segmented assortment could look like. And last but not least, we also have a Q&A. So if you have any questions during the webinar, we really invite you to put them in the chat on LinkedIn. We will discuss them at the end of the webinar. So please do that during the webinar if you have any questions or comments you would like to discuss. So now we go over to the first topic. I would like to start with an article that was published by the World Economic Forum. A majority of chief economists expect a period of stagflation. That was the title of the article that was published in January, which actually means that the chief economists expect, especially in Europe, a weak economic growth, stagnating economic growth, and a high rate of inflation. So that's the prediction for 2023. And what does this mean? With this high rate of inflation, it means that the same consumers have a limited budget, and a lot of companies are fishing in a smaller pond. So that means a pressure on prices. This is also why pricing can be a very powerful tool in periods of stagflation. So we are more entering a new economic cycle, and that's where pricing is becoming more important. And in the next slide, we discuss two tactics you can actually apply during a period of stagflation, because it's all about managing demand. Every company wants to grow in its revenues and grow in its margin. And what you could do, you can, of course, increase your prices with the rate of inflation. This will make sure that you keep your profit margins in line with inflation. But the question is, do you keep your demand? And I think that's a good question. You can only answer with the right data. The other tactic you could do is decrease prices to test, okay, is this product, is it very price sensitive? And can I increase my demand if I slightly decrease my prices compared to the competition? And of course, one of those two tactics are really hard to apply if you do that purely on gut feeling. And that's why data analytics can really help you making these decisions more fundamentally and more validated. So that's why you can use analytics, and why you can also use a good product segmentation, because if you have your product segmented and your customer segmented, you're also able to make better validated decisions, what prices you could increase or decrease. The next topic is really about product segmentation. Why is it an underestimated activity in pricing management? So during our discussions we had with customers, we often see that the product segmentation could be a one-size-fits-all approach. And this actually assumes that all customers treat all products the same and have the same willingness to pay. But this is often not the case because customers have different budgets, they have different preferences, but also relating to the stagflation. If we're entering a new period in the economy, it could be that customers could have different preferences because they have different budgets to buy products for. So this means you have to be more. You could have a more dynamic approach in your product segmentation to reply and to have a rapid response on the changing customer behavior. So this is what we will address in this webinar. And in the next slide, we have made a couple of benefits you could have when you're segmenting your products. So first of all is you have a better understanding what are the customer needs and behavior, and especially what could be the changing customer needs and behavior. You could get insights in how different product groups value your products. We will later give some examples in this webinar. You could identify opportunities to increase or decrease your prices without negatively impacting sales and increase your margins. And last but not least, you can also have better marketing campaigns. If you have a better understanding what your customers prefer, then you can also have better marketing campaigns to promote the products they really prefer. So these are some of the benefits of a good product segmentation. And that's what we want to discuss in this webinar. So the third topic is the product segmentation model. And I would like to give the floor to Vincent, where he explains the model in 7 steps.
Thanks, Arjen, for the introduction. Yes, as Arjen said, product segmentation is a kind of, in some companies, undervalued exercise. It's for sure for the times, as Arjen has discussed, where we are heading ahead, that we want to help companies to set them up for success in the coming period. And to do so, we developed a 7-step model to help you set it up and have a structured approach towards hopefully nice results. So in the 7-step model, we firstly are going to focus on the identifying key attributes that we can assign to products. So by assigning key attributes to products, we position ourselves to be able to move to the next step, and that is making groups out of product groups out of the attributes that we have assigned to products. So if we have a couple of attributes, of course, that we can decide if we can assign, then we can select those and then build a product group out of it. And actually the same kind of strategy we then apply towards customer groups. So we are going to discuss and elaborate on models that we can apply across customer data, and then use the customer data to get insights which key attributes are assigned to customers, and then again assign these attributes together so that we can define also customer groups that we can then take also as a target position. Once the product groups are formulated and the customer groups are formulated, we move, of course, towards the matching of those two. So it can be the case that we assign multiple product groups to multiple customer groups, but it can also be that one product is assigned to multiple customer groups or multiple customer groups to one product. So there's a lot of combinations there, of course. And once we have done that, we, of course, want to determine the optimal price. So in which combination are we going to execute what type of price strategy to make sure that we fetch as much margin out of the market, or maybe we just want to maintain a certain market share or even try to grow market share. So there are some strategies there that we can apply. And finally, of course, and I think this is the general thing that we want to bring over also during this presentation, is that this is not a exercise that you do once, right? So we constantly need to evaluate, for sure, if we are dealing with more volatile markets, that we have to understand how do we re-evaluate all these steps to be sure that we are always on top of the execution of our strategies, but also are able to, of course, optimize the organization during different periods that we are moving through, and make sure that we are the survivor of certain stagnation periods. So as said, the first step that we are going to do is to identify attributes that can be chosen to segment your products. So we're going to discuss in this sheet 5 different ones, and we will elaborate on 2 more specific in the next sheet, and not all of them, but just to give you an idea how that could function. So the first one that we see here, how can you assign attributes to a product, can be based, for instance, on quality. So there is a model that we are going to discuss how we assess the quality of a product. And these attributes can then be used to assign it to different products that you have on your inventory. The next one is one that we see mainly applied within organizations is the profitability of a product. So it's a more it's a let's say easier approach to make a separation between profitability within your products and assign how much they bring in. The other one is based on customer demand and the popularity of the product. So we can make a setup in that one as well, of course. The fourth one that could be applied is the velocity of sales and revenue. So here we are looking more into the fast movers and the slow movers. So it's a separation of your products and services that you are selling in that sense. And the final one that we can do, and that is something that we see more and more, for instance, in commodity markets, is that we are going to assess the competitive intensity. So if you are able to scrape markets and get information out of the World Wide Web in terms of how does my competition look like, and how much competition do I have on different products, and what type of strategy do I want to execute on that level, then of course the intensity of the competitive field can be used as well to assign that to different products in terms of a high density market or maybe a bit lower one. So as said, one of the models that we wanted to discuss is based on the quality. So for instance, in the quality assessment of products, we can make use of a Graven model. Graven model, as shown here, uses 8 different elements that we can assign to a product. Just to elaborate a little bit on it, so what we can do, for instance, we can measure performance of a product, but also reliability, durability, conformance, the features that we have, of course, on a product. The next one is about the visual attractiveness of a product. So how does it look like, and do I really like the product in its appearance? The other one is the serviceability. And the last one is, of course, the perceived quality from the client's perspective towards, or the buyer's perspective towards the product. So what we can do with these types of models, that really can depend per organization, right? So if we want to do a full analysis around the quality of a product and use that as a score to segment our products eventually, it can be that we take into account all these different elements. So we make a scorecard for each product, we fill it in, and we, for instance, use a Likert scale for it or something else. So we just give it a score 1 to 10, and then based on all these different elements, we give them a score. We summarize the score, take an average, and that is the average score that we give to a product that we are selling, so that we then can make groups out of those scores. Can also be the case that you think that a few of these elements are not that applicable. So then I would say pick those that are applicable for your organization or the industry that you are active in. So all the models that are available are, of course, great to use, great examples. There's a lot of documentation about it, how you can apply these models, but always be aware of the domain where you are active in and how valid each point is to be measured, and take that into account, what you think that counts best for your organization and, of course, the domain you are active in. The other one is, of course, that we, as said before, is what we see more often is the financial performance measurement of a product in an organization. So the approach is how I would say it's more controllable and maintainable in terms of execution, and doesn't include like 8 different ways of rating a product and then making a scorecard and taking average out of it. The other one, as presented here, is more on the financial performance. So we just make it a line, for instance, where we see how much margin contribution a product is making to the organization. And then we make a kind of overview in a chart where we can say, all right, we see that these products bring in this much of revenue, and etc. And then we make a categorization in that one. In this case, we have an analysis, for instance, on 3 different levels. So it can be categorized on a high contribution financially, can be a moderate contribution financially, or a low contribution financially. And then we make like a separation in these groups based on the data, of course, that we extract out of the product data that we can find within your organization. So once we have assigned all these different attributes to the products, then, as said already a little bit, is that we are going to make clusters or groups out of them based on the similarities or the clusters that we can define within these attributes. So this is where the grouping of the product starts. And a visualization, how that could look like in terms of the financial analysis that we just elaborated on a little bit. Here you see, for instance, an overview of the margin contribution of a product towards the organization, right? So we see the margin running from 0 to 100%, and now we want to make different groups. So normally we would call this an ABC analysis, but in this case we have defined 4 groups following the red lines that you see in this chart. So the first group is, for instance, with a margin contribution to roughly, let's say, 10%. The second group start with a margin contribution to 20%. The next group on top of it is the majority of the group is contributing between 20 and 80% margin of the products, and the final group is the 80 to 100%. And in this way, we have defined 4 different groups where we now can start working with, because we have identified them as a product group where we can start assigning, of course, customer groups towards. But now we have to first identify the customer groups that we can find within our organization and where we are doing business with. So that is also the step that we are for sure going to take here. So how do we execute an analysis across customer data? And what types of variables can we then apply to identify the customer groups that are active within our organization? So we can discuss for the first 4 different ways how to identify customer groups. Again, identifying customer groups also has a lot of different variables that we can take into account. I will discuss 4 of them here, but if you do a quick search online, there are many different elements that we can use to score customer groups. Again, I would say look at the industry where you are working, look at the organization, how you are organized, and maybe already work with that data that you have internally, and then decide which data you can utilize best to make and define your customer groups. So the ones that I want to discuss for this presentation is, for instance, geographic data. So this can be, for instance, about the population, the country, but can also be a specific region or maybe even environmental aspects that we want to take into account to understand how the customer group we are dealing with is set, right? So scoring the customer data based on that. The second one, what we can also apply is, for instance, more on the demographic level, right? So then we are zooming in a little bit more on the customer itself, and we are going to score different things there. So that can be something like the age of a customer, but can also be the gender, maybe education level or level of income. So we can really focus on the more personal characteristics around the customer that is buying products within your organization. The third one is already a little bit more complex, because we want to zoom in the behavioral side of the potential buyer of our products. So I would say one of the more easy things is what you can apply if you are using, for instance, Google Ads or something like that, that also measures how clients visit your online or your channels, how they visit your online channels. This can be done, for instance, via mobile phone, but can also be the case that they use a desktop to enter these environments. So this tells you something about their behavior towards the visitation of your organization. But can also be that you trace them more on the social media activities that we see coming across, so that we learn about the behavior of the different customers that we serve within our organization. And the last one that we see in this model, or that we would like to discuss, is, for instance, the psychological elements towards a client. And I think this one is also it's harder to collect the data, that's for sure. But it also tells you a lot about the state of your potential buyer. So this dives into the communication. So how does the communication is coming across? How, for instance, customers feel about the current state of the economy. That can be something that can be measured in a sociological environment, but it can also be about beliefs, or even that they follow a certain trend in lifestyle settings. So these are different elements that can be applied within the psychological domain. Another model that we often see coming across is more financially oriented, as what we have seen by the products. And this is called the RFM model. The RFM model really focused on the monetary value that a customer is contributing to your organization. So in the RFM model, we measure three different things. The first one is the recency. So the recency dives or says something about freshness of a buyer within your organization. So how long has it been before that they have bought something within your organization? The second step that we then measure is the frequency. So what is the frequency that a client buys something within your organization and then comes back for a repurchase, or maybe buying different products? Of course, there are multiple options there as well, but that is things that we measure. And then the final measurement that we can take is really on the monetary part. And the monetary part is all about what is the deal size that we make with the clients that we serve, right? So can we even make strategies to increase the deal size that we close with our clients, or are there any options there? But by measuring these three steps, we can zoom in more into the data that we have. I would say these types of models can already be used by organizations that exist for a certain amount of time, because probably they have the data set to work on these levels. Well, however, if we look back to the model that we discussed before this sheet, can also be applied if you don't have too much customer data yet, but you have some information. So out of that information, we can start making assumption and build these customer groups. So also models depend on the maturity of your organization, and in terms how long you exist, of course, in the data collection that you have executed. So if we then take the RFM model in consideration, how do we use that data then to come to a certain separation in different customer groups, right? So that is where we want to work towards. So what we made here on the left side, we made the monetary value. So what is the revenue contribution of clients towards, of customers towards our organization? And on the bottom side, we measure the kind of the clusters of the customers that have bought the products with us. And as we can see, that this line is going from the left top to the right bottom. And what we more or less can do is make then 4 different groups out of this one. So I would argue that the first group is between the first and the second dot, right? So they bring in lots of revenue, of course. It's the biggest contribution there, and the line is between 1 to 2 clusters, right? The second one is more to 2 to 3. So here we see a little bit less contribution, but of course still a very interesting group to bring some extra revenue within the organization. The third group, is already bringing, again, lesser than the first and the second group. And the fourth one is the final part of the line, where we see, of course, a bunch of transactions that we have made. But in terms of how much contribution they delivered revenue-wise to the organization is limited if you compare it to, of course, the first one. But nevertheless, the overall contribution can be still substantial, but that really depends, of course, on the number of transactions that are made. So now we have identified or have used different elements to score the attributes within the customer groups, and we have made a separation in what their contribution is to the organization, and we made already the grouping in 1, 2, and 3, and 4. We want to visualize that, right? So what does that really mean? And that we can do, for instance, in a bar chart as visualized here. So what we see here is then the 3 different groups that we have identified, and then the monetary value that is contributed to our organization. And what I personally like in these types of analysis, if you did it on a financial analysis part, it would be of great insights to now look into these different customer groups and make an analysis based on demographics, geographic, social behavioral attributes, and maybe psychological attributes as well, right? Just to learn more about these customer groups and see if there are any patterns in there that you can make these customer groups even more specific in understanding what their contribution is, but also how do you need to address them. Because, of course, the first group that you have here and the second one, of course, as well, are maybe the 2 main focus areas where you want to be active in if you want to maintain a certain business level, but even have possibilities to grow, so that you really know how you are going to target these 2 groups. Of course, we can argue that 1, 2, and 3 are all valid, and that 4 needs a little bit less attention. But of course, in terms of monetary value, we start with the highest one, and then, of course, the interest is moving downwards as the contribution is moving down as well. So now we have summarized, assigned key attributes to products, made product groups, assigned key attributes to our customer, made customer groups. And what we now want to do is make these combinations, right? So which customer group are we going to assign to which product group? And this really helps, of course, to plot it on a chart. So what we are going to do, again, we are diving into the financial performance of these two groups. So we have the product profitability, but also the monetary value, of course, that is in this case measured. And now we are going to set the combinations of the products and the customer groups in this chart. So it can be that we are dealing with a high monetary value, but a low product profitability. But of course, the sweet spot eventually will be that you have a high monetary value and also a high product profitability, because that is where you make, of course, a lot of margin. But in each of these positions where you can land with the product, and of course, there are more neutral positions. This is really kind of black and white separation in a quadrant, but they can be like kind of in the middle or in different locations as well. But it gives you a great overview to understand where are my product customer group combinations placed within my organization, and to really understand what their position is so that you can start learning about how you want to execute the price strategy around that. And then we, of course, want to optimize that. And that is where we move towards determining the optimal price. And where we want to elaborate a little bit on here is what we see is if you execute these types of analysis, what we often see is that the company strategy is not always taken into account. So if we have identified, for instance, a product group, but also a customer group, and we make a combination out of those two, and then we see that we are a very competitive market and that we have to lower prices and that we are really sharp on the margins, then it's very hard to execute a customer intimacy strategy with your organization, right? Because it takes, in terms of money, a lot of marketing budget or whatsoever to build that relation with your customer. So in terms of how you define these combinations and where you see the product combination with your customer group combination land, should also be in the area where you align with your company strategy. And in general, we distinguish, of course, 3 different strategies that you can execute as an organization. So as I just mentioned a few sentences before, is the first one is about customer intimacy, so that we really focus on the relationship. And kind of the outcome of these types of strategies is that the customer is a kind of an ambassador of your organization, in love with the brand. It would take something very special to make him pivot or her pivot to a different brand or solution in the same domain. The other one that we see is product leadership, right? So then, for instance, in terms of functionality or innovation and stuff that you include in your product, you are always delivering the new features towards the market. So people just love your product because you are, kind of unique, always in the front, just a bit better than the rest in the market. And the last one, of course, is the operational excellence. If we look at operational excellence, then we are working on best prices, right? We have a super lean organization. We know how we have to produce things at a very sharp cost price, saying that we can also offer very attractive prices in the market. Of course, still margins can be made on a high level, but in general, we see that this strategy, of course, suits better in a strategy where the competition is a little bit higher and where you want to have sharp prices within your strategy and in your domain. All right, so hopefully these few steps that we just have discussed make something clear. So how we identify attributes around the product, make product groups, identify attributes around the customer, make customer groups, and then make these combination and move towards price strategies, but that you always keep in mind what the company strategy is all about, to make sure that the online communication that you have as an organization and where you stand for is always in line with what you communicate also in prices towards the market. And at this point, we are going to the next step in this presentation. I would like to give the floor back to Arjan, who's going to elaborate a bit more on how you can segment your assortment and how that could look like.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. I will continue with the next topic. Vincent already showed this quadrant, and I think we all like to think in quadrants. So we previously explained how you could segment your products versus how you could segment your customers. And if we present it in a quadrant like this, Of course, the upper right top is the most valuable top, where we want to have the most customers and products in. But now it's getting interesting. And what you can do now with having this quadrant, we can assign pricing strategies to it to actually make actions based upon this quadrant. So of course, when we have the highest monetary value, but also the highest product profitability, this is the most valuable part of the quadrant. And the strategy for this is that we can capitalize this. So maybe a few fine-tunements are possible here, but it's mainly here maintaining the customers and maintaining the products in this quadrant. You can compare it with the cash cow quadrant of the BCG matrix. If you have a high product profitability but a low monetary value, what you could do is that I think what the customers are buying is good. So they buy the high profitable products. But maybe if we want to increase the number of customers and if we want to make the product for a wider market attractive, what we could do is that we can take a better look in the competitive landscape and make our prices more compatible to move more customers into the ideal state of the cash cow. Another tactic could be for the high monetary value but the low product profitability. And there a tactic could be to try to increase the margin, because we have already a lot of monetary value, so a lot of customers are buying these products. But how can we increase the margin of this quadrant? So how can we, for example, promote more higher margin products to these accounts? So what we could do here is to consider a key value item pricing strategy, where we do analysis. Okay, what kind of products are related to each other, and how can we promote these related products into the basket so that we increase the basket value in revenue and in margin. And of course, we have also the quadrant of a low product profitability and a low monetary value. What's here? This is the most attractive, or the least attractive quadrant, of course. So what we could do here, is we have to take a critical look to our customers. Do we believe these customers could be increased in monetary value, or can we convince them to buy higher margin products? If not, we should consider to drop them. But we can test with increasing the prices to a level where we can increase our margins. And we can also test with price elasticity how price sensitive these customers are. So what we did to make it more practical, we already explained how you can have 4 different product groups and how you can have 4 different customer groups. So we have 16 combinations. And for the 16 combinations, we have plotted here the pricing strategy which you could apply as an idea. And of course, the most extremes are easiest to apply. And so we see the highest profitability customers and products, we have the capitalization, and the least profitable customers and products, we need to increase our prices, as already explained in the previous slide. So of course, the most extremes are the easiest to apply for, and the most neutral ones. Therefore, I think we have to do a mix of strategies. It's a bit of dependent of how these customers behave. But of course, we want to understand how we can make these customers and the products, how we can increase them in margin or in revenue. And that's why we can apply a mix of strategies, but we can also apply experimentation. And on the next slide, you can see how we can apply these experimentations. So what you see here is a demand slope. It's often a negative slope. So the higher the price, the least quantity the customers will buy. But we want to test with these customers and these products if we can increase them in margin, of course. And by this, we can test their price sensitivity or their price elasticity to slowly increasing the prices or decreasing the prices based upon the assumptions we have of these products, or based upon the historical data we have from the prices for the customers. So if it's highly sensitive, we can experiment with a slowly lower price to increase the sales here. And when we assume it's insensitive, we can experiment with slightly higher prices to test if we can increase the margin without losing sales. So this is how you can understand and test the behavior of more neutral customers and neutral products in order to move them to the cash cow or to a quadrant that makes it more interesting from the company strategy perspective. So this is more a summary slide. Vincent started explaining in how you can identify key product attributes to segment your products. He discussed several models for this. We explained how you can group these products based upon similar behavior so that you have clear products, for example, with the ABCD analysis. Then we analyzed customer data, so we can group the customer data into customer segments. And then we discussed the step how you can match the customer segments with the product segments. And then it's a good start to determine optimal prices based upon your company strategy. And yeah, now I will discuss the last step of continuously monitoring and adjusting, because what we just discussed, it could be a snapshot. We just took the current data and we analyzed the products and the customers. But of course, what we already explained in the beginning, the economy could change, the circumstances could change, but also the customer preferences and the customer behavior could change. And therefore, to avoid, we do a snapshot at once. Yeah, you actually need to continuously monitoring and adjust the pricing strategies, but also adjust your product and customer segmentation. Because if you have set your prices, a customer can react on it. You want to maintain your margins. As I said, the market circumstances could be very dynamic. And therefore, you can use pricing software to maintain or to continuously monitor and adjust the strategies and also the applied pricing strategies. So it's really a combination to do this whole process. To do it as it should be done. It requires good software, it requires good tools, but also the right data to make the best decisions for segmentation and price optimization. As I said, this is the last step. You can assign a task for evaluation, and that you continuously are monitoring your margin, but also how your products and how your customers behave. So we're moving a little bit to the end of the webinar. We are already talking for almost 40 minutes, but we like to almost close down before we go to the Q&A with a quote of the well-known Warren Buffett. This quote was also discussed this morning on the radio, and the quote is called, "Only when the tide goes out, you discover who has been swimming naked." Actually, what is meant by this quote is that everyone looks like a genius in a booming market. But when the circumstances could be more challenging, the differences between good and bad companies can be more visible. So also now in a period when the economy becomes a little bit more challenging, the difference between good and bad companies can be more visible. And that's why you can make, with a good pricing strategy and a good product segmentation, a real difference in your market. If you can really act on data and you have the right tools in place, you can really make a difference between your competitor and your company in the market. So this is like a message we would like to share with you, that this can be a very interesting time to manage your prices and to be really competitive in the market. So we also like to give the attention for our peer events. Our experience is that it's very valuable to share pricing challenges with other companies. So on April 19, we organize an expert group discussion close to Utrecht. And we do it with great companies like Simon Leveld, XXL Nutrition, Picnic, Henry Schein. A lot of companies are there, and we really like to invite you for this. We have a couple of spots available. So if you're interested to join this event, it's a dinner close to Utrecht. You can send me or Vincent a private message to attend this dinner. It's a great opportunity. So this is what we like to give you as an entity of this webinar. And now we go to the questions. I will check if there are any questions in the LinkedIn chat. I see here a question from Luc. Thanks for asking the question, Luc. The question is, how do you measure the success of a product segmentation strategy, and what metrics should you use? I think that's a great question. Vincent, would you like to start, or do you think? You're muted, Vincent.
Yeah, sorry for that. Yes, of course, I think in general that this is, of course, a great question, because what we want to learn out of this question is also, where are we coming from, right? So if your data wasn't in place starting of this journey, then it's hard to make the comparison. But what I would say in terms of success, if you do the analysis and you execute the price strategy eventually should deliver the results where we are looking for, right? So because we make the analysis across the products and the customer groups, and the combination of those two in terms of a price strategy and the financial outcome of that tells us something about the success that we are achieving together. If the outcome of that strategy has a negative influence on the whole, then of course this is where we get to the monitoring and adjusting part. Then you have to reevaluate what is missed in making these types of combinations. But in general, we see that once organizations start applying these type of in-depth analysis to come to the price strategies and the combinations that we earlier discussed, that success out of that is one of the elements that we can for sure measure based on, for instance, benchmarks, market-specific metrics that we can, of course, analyze and then compare that to the company results, and then eventually, of course, make the directions visible and determine if success has been achieved or not.
Yes, thanks for answering, Vincent. I see also a question of Laura. You were held up, and you're asking, where is the recording? The recording will be sent after this webinar. So today or tomorrow, you will get a recording link of this webinar where you can see the replay of it. So no problem if you are tuning in a little bit later. Go to the next question. It's a question from Quinton. What resources will we need to implement our segmentation strategy effectively? And thanks for asking this question, Quinton. Yeah, as we already briefly discussed in the webinar, you need resources. Of course, you need a good data set to make your segmentation. You need also the right tools and also the right analytical capabilities in your organization to make this segmentation. But if you don't have these capabilities, good software, good pricing software can help you because the software can help you organize this data and also make different scenarios and customer segmentation based upon similar behavior in the data set.
Yes.
So these are resources you need, but of course it starts with the data, and it also starts with a kind of a clear idea what can be the types of product and customer segmentations. That's also related to your company you're active in, B2B or B2C.
And I think that there's also a difference in that analysis, of course, because what we see in B2B is that we are dealing with multiple customer groups already, like they start already with a kind of setup where we have different customer groups. As if we look at, for instance, more B2C, then sometimes there is just one channel where the products are sold. And sometimes we see, of course, a main side of a certain brand, and that they have some affiliates where they have different price strategies where that is executed. So also in terms of what is your business domain and are you a B2B or a B2C seller really influences, of course, how we approach these different types of strategies. But I think what you want to set yourself up for is that you have the ability to quickly shift the segmentation within your products so that you then can assign these products within, of course, the target groups that you want to reach, but that you have the flexibility to make pivots in the short term, right? So that it doesn't take too long that it doesn't consume too much time to do so, because then you can lose your competitive edge.
Yes, great addition. Yeah, looking at the time, I think we're a little bit over time. So thanks for asking the questions, Luc, Quinten, and Laurent. Yeah, the closing is up to you, Vincent.
All right. Thanks, I would say in general, for joining, of course, this webinar. If you want to have a personalized demo that we can talk a little bit more in depth with you about your organization, of the challenges or opportunities that you see, we can, of course, set up a call together. You can use this QR code to link on my LinkedIn. And then, of course, out of the chat, we can make an appointment there. You can also visit our website, symson.com/demo. Just book a demo there, and out of the demo inquiry that we receive, we will follow up shortly to make sure that we have an appointment in the agenda, and of course discuss any topics that you may have in that setting. So yeah, I would say thanks for attending, and of course hope you see or in the peer event if you have any time left, and else in the next webinar that we will host together.
Right. Thanks for joining.
See ya.
Great day. Bye-bye.